So let's say someone is asked to imagine an apple on a table. Do people actually see the apple on the table? And to what extent? Today, we're taking an in-depth look at what the experience and the spectrum of prophantasia, or being able to project mental imagery into your physical environment, is actually like. So let's get to it.
Meow.
Hey, welcome back to Aphantasia Meow. My name is Alec, and on this channel we talk about aphantasia, the experience of visualization, the differences, and all that stuff. Today we're going to be continuing our conversation on prophantasia, the ability to project mental imagery into your physical environment. And if you haven't already checked out episodes 1 and 2 of this series, I highly encourage you to do so. They were released in the prior weeks leading up to now. Okay, so at this point, we've drawn distinctions between how mental imagery is different than projected imagery. We've also talked about an idea, a general rarity kind of number on how rare projecting images might be. Now today, let's talk about the different ways on how to experience prophantasia and the different type of, spectrum that it can have in and of its own. Okay, so first, here's the image that I created a few years ago to try to draw the distinction between mind's eye and prophantasia. And if we just look at the prophantasia spectrum alone, it's not bad. It's not a terrible representation. However, I find that it is quite limited in, its representation of what the experience is actually like. I don't feel like it's very clear. So let's kick things up a notch here and make some more visual representations. And so last time we looked at visual snow, right? And where prophantasia usually occurs like this. So if your eyes are closed, you kind of have your mind's eye space, right? And then you have that space in front of you. And if somebody's projecting the image of a triangle, they would start to see something like this, where the triangle is starting to kind of fill up the space in front of them. Maybe nothing's happening in the mind's eye, maybe there is, but in this case, nothing's happening in the mind's eye. But they are projecting that image of the triangle out to that area in front of them. Okay, so now kicking things up a notch, besides just seeing vague outlines like this, you can actually start to see those outlines starting to be filled in, sort of like this. So the outline could become stronger and then filled in. And then besides just simple shapes like triangles or whatever, you could also start to project outlines and filled in shapes of more complex shapes like an apple, or like a feather, or like a face. That was one of the ones that I enjoyed starting with back in the day. And so some other common experiences when it comes to starting to access prophantasia could be hypnagogic imagery. Definitely happens for a lot of people, where you're starting to fall asleep and then these vivid images kind of flash in front of you. Usually they're kind of random and very brief. That would be an example of a prophantasic experience as well. And those sorts of hypnagogic experiences can actually be very, very vivid too. Very, very lifelike. I say it's low level though, because it's usually not intentional from the person. It's usually just kind of this mind chatter that's happening as you're falling asleep. Another type of common prophantasia experience would be like a phosphene, okay? And a phosphene would look a lot like this, right? And with your eyes closed, it would look kind of like this. So seeing little flashes of light and stuff like that, that could definitely be considered a low-level prophantasia experience as well. Now, the last low-level prophantasia experience I want to talk about, there's actually not a name that I can find for this experience, so I've lovingly named it Blobulars, okay? But whatever, that's just a silly name. We don't have to call it that for real. And that kind of experience can look a lot like this. Now, this is the best representation that I've found, anyway, of what that kind of color swirl starts to look. Yeah, it's kind of like this, like it can be pulsating from the inside. It can go around in circles. It can fade back into the center. It just depends on the experience at any given time, but it's this kind of light colored swirl that people starts to see. And usually for me, it's a little green, like it's green and light neon colored. In this representation, of course, it's not that, but other people have seen like purple ones or red ones or whatever. But these blobulars are a very common experience, especially when people are messing around and playing with meditation. These tend to start to form, and I can't really find much information about what it actually is. I have my ideas, but we'll talk about that another time. So now going up the spectrum of prophantasia, eventually you can begin to do things where you are fully seeing something in 3D, full on blow, like full color, and it's being shown in front of you, kind of like this. And sometimes, like, I found the blobular sort of color gradient will start to pass, and behind it will be a full-blown image like that. It's really interesting. It's like this color thing is coming by, and then behind it, or in the color thing, is this full-on three-dimensional projected image. Okay, so let's look at some more examples. So last time we looked at this, like if your eyes were open and you were looking at a wall, you could project a triangle on top of that wall, right? Some people can even do something more like this, where they actually start to really see that triangle pop through, and it starts to take up physical space, so they can't even see the wall behind the triangle anymore. And then still fewer people are able to do something kind of like this, where, you know, maybe they're looking at this scene and then this creature or like this butterfly starts flying through the scene, almost like a hologram, you know, and depending on where somebody's at in this prophantasia spectrum, they'll see that hologram of that butterfly or whatever they're imagining be more or less transparent. Another higher level prophantasia experience is being able to change the color of something at will. Instead of seeing the color of the cup as white, they could physically change the appearance of the color itself to something a little more, you know, like red or something like that. Okay, so pretty interesting stuff about this prophantasia spectrum. And it's fascinating to me that it's quite independent of the mind's eye spectrum. You know, there's hyperphantagics that are unable to project imagery at all. And yet there's other people that I've even talked to that describe aphantasia that are able to project some measure of projected imagery. It's very, very curious phenomenon here. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you found that information valuable to give you kind of a better idea of what the prophantasia experience can be like on the low end and the high end. And next time on part 4 of this prophantasia series, we're going to be talking about my own prophantagic experience and progression, and how you can start making some progress for yourself. Okay, so that's it. Make sure you comment down below, especially if you have prophantasia and you're finding that this description is quite close to what you can do. I'd love to hear from you. Also, make sure you're subscribed and that you ring that bell, or else it's not going to notify you when I do upload a new video. And yeah, love you guys. I'll see you next time. All right, bye.